Good afternoon. We've got an interesting discussion ahead of us. Sorry we started late, but we wanted to give a chance for as many people as possible to join us. It's been quite an interesting conference and summit, I have to say. We've got quite a lineup of distinguished movers and shakers in the Egyptian renewable energy arena. If I may humbly start, my name is Hadi Tahboub, Vice President of the Middle East Solar Industry Association, where I'm a volunteer member representing a corporate entity, Sky Power Global. And to my left, we've got a friend in the industry and a prominent name in the Egyptian renewable energy market, Mr. Sharif Al-Gabali, Managing Director of Inara Capital, an industrial and infrastructure project development platform operating across the MENA region, Middle East and Africa region. And it was interesting to get to know, mashallah, that Sharif has aspirations in utilizing his experience in Egypt to tap into the GCC opportunities, including, inshallah, Abu Dhabi. To his left, we've got Mr. Kurt Neubauer. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
The German way or the American way, either way.
Neubauer.
Neubauer.
General Manager at Sargent & Lundy. Mr. Neubauer has over 25 years experience in engineering and consulting in the power generation industry. We cross paths many a times in various summits, conferences, and even projects. Sargent & Lundy is a global provider of engineering design and technical consulting services that's dedicated exclusively to the power industry. And last but not least, to his left, Mr. Faisal Isa, founder and partner at Solar Shams, a very interesting entity and player in the Egyptian solar and wind energy sector, a firm highly specialized in the field of wind and solar energy throughout the Middle East. And we've got some prominent attendees from the Egyptian government as well, and we're very honored, Dr. Sobki, with your presence, and of course, our extended audience as well. Before we start, I think it's part of also time management. You would all notice you've got those interesting iPad gizmos on your chairs. If anyone has a question that he would like to ask, and I think this improves people being anonymous so that you could ask embarrassing questions without raising your hands. Please tap in the question and send it, and I'll keep refreshing my page, and if it pops up, I'll send it. If we didn't ask the question, please raise your hand. It might have not popped on my screen. Right. Gentlemen, ever since we all crossed paths many times a year ago in Egypt, and roughly same time last year, the amazing landmark Sharm el-Sheikh Economic Development Conference in Egypt, where we had a very tangible taste of the visions, the plans of the new Egypt that the whole Arab world looks to. Many goals have been set in place. And I tend to look at it as a springboard. That conference was a springboard. You jump high, but at the end, it's how you get into the water properly. So yes, there were a lot of projects announced and whatnot, but I think this was more of a stimulus, a catalyst for telling the world, Egypt is ready, Egypt is fertile. It's interesting to know that for the first time in a long time, last summer, the Egyptian people celebrated not one power cut, which is quite an amazing achievement, not one power cut in the Republic of Egypt. And this just shows that we are ready. This just shows that behind the scenes, behind all those interesting conferences and discussions and visits and trade delegations, a lot of homework is being done on the side to manage the demand, to manage the efficiency of the, there's a number of programs that are done on different fronts. So I'd like I'd like to ask Sharif, to start with Sharif, where are we today in terms of managing and handling the increasing demand for the world's most populous country, a country which has a major potential to keep on growing, to keep on investing in not just tourism, which is a very big component of the Egyptian economy, but as well industries and whatnot?
Yeah, you know, Egypt, first I confirm the sentiment, the facts on ground as we speak today. It's totally different than when at Sharm el-Sheikh. But we lived very unstable 4 to 5 years after the revolution. There has been fundamental and elemental changes in the economy of Egypt since, most of which your main foreign currency sources have been dramatically decreasing. You're faced with geopolitical challenges. You're faced with social challenges, and you're faced with economical challenges. Definitely, with this new state, with we today celebrating the 3 corners of our democratic pillars, which is a parliament, which today has passed the unified electricity law. And Dunia may be on the panel before, she was just explaining what was happening. So yeah, I see a very bright future. I see a promise, which is maybe not with the same overwhelming, you know, ambitious, dreamy rainbow view we saw in Sharm el-Sheikh happening. However, there has been real progress on ground. We see a subsidy removal plan, which is again the main trigger to have a real power industry in Egypt. We see a feed-in tariff, a very promising feed-in tariff program. We see a unified electricity law, which is meant to liberalize an electricity market, buy and sell. There has been a lot of progress on the generation side, as you were saying. Today we barely witness any power cuts. There are bilateral and governmental agreements to have the transmission infrastructure upgraded to maintain the new generation coming online. So yeah, there has been many aspects on the infrastructure. So I would say, just to, in a nutshell, what's being focused now from the state and from the government is to have a strong infrastructure that can accept investments and a more ease of framework and legislations which can really maintain an investment-friendly environment. Yeah.
Speaking of the feed-in tariff program, the notable FIT program in Egypt, and with targets set at 20% renewable energy by 2020. There's a number of schemes, power scheme, feed-in tariff schemes. Everyone was rushing to the 2,000 megawatt, but we never hear of anything happening or anyone raising discussions on the 300 megawatt. So that kind of like calls into question what's the potential of not just that, but the rooftop solar potential in Egypt. Could you comment on that, Sharif?
Well, you know, the problem with the rooftop scheme and the small scheme is that it hasn't been designed with the same incentives we see, at least on the utility scale scheme. The utility scale scheme is correlated with a dollar, so it's more structured in terms of modeling and easier to finance, specifically with DFIs. On the small rooftop, it's fixed. It's EGP based. It's not that attractive. It would be more of luxury, you know, or more of marketing demand side than a real economic model where you can have, you know, supply-demand structure. I believe Faisal, Solar Shams, are one of the players on this rooftop market, and I guess he can elaborate further on this. But as far as we've seen, no, there is no real demand. Definitely, we need more local banks involved with preferential interest rates, with more structured finance, at least for this scheme. So in order to have this up and running. Yeah.
Before we move to our next distinguished speaker, for those who have just joined us in the audience, you could use the iPads on your seats for typing up questions, and upon pressing send, it'll reach me directly, hopefully. If I did not address a question, raise your hand, it might have not reached me. Moving quickly to Faisal, how do you view the growth curve in Egypt for rooftop solar in parallel with managing the demand? I mean, we celebrated so far, knock on wood, alhamdulillah, a year of no power cuts, and that is something worth being proud of in Egypt. And as a prominent player in the rooftop solar industry, are we on a good, stable uphill curve, or are there still challenges ahead of us?
First of all, thank you, of course, for inviting me to be on this panel today, and it's an honor to be trying to give a little bit of a view about what's happening in Egypt, and specifically on the demand side. Before I answer the question, it's really important to think about renewable energies in general. It's not only solar PV, there is solar thermal, also very high potential, there is wind, and there is other things. But specifically for rooftop, we just have to, first of all, start from the base that what happened in Egypt in the last year is an achievement. We have to start from that base, whether it's on the announcement of an increasing energy prices. This is something that we have been calling for quite a long time, that we need to remove the subsidies on the energy. Now we have a clear plan for the next 5 years that where the energy prices are going. We have the introduction of the solar feed-in tariff, as Sharif has said, and also on the smaller scale projects on the rooftop. And we have other schemes which is specific for some industries. We have schemes for tourism, you have some schemes for financing solar water heaters. We're working with Nerea on this. So as far as the rooftop comes, I personally think this is the real growth potential for the market. Today, we're focusing on big projects. That's okay. Of course, we need it. We're a nation that was hungry for megawatt, let's put it this way. And after the development which is taking place now on the 50 megawatts, I think the real growth potential is coming from the smaller and distributed generation, whether it's rooftop or still ground mounted. On the 300 megawatts, yes, there is a potential. Yes, there is a typical scheme for it, but we need to think a little bit more about specifics that will help such small industry to move on. Things like financing schemes specified for rooftop, maybe thinking a little bit about the tariff compared to the bigger tariff again, because we know that on the bigger scale projects, the tariff is actually higher than the smaller scale, which is different for many countries in the world. So such supporting schemes, I would call it, to help the main program to move on, would definitely help the 300 megawatt to move on.
Such supporting schemes. Well, as a leading player in the industry, like many other companies in Egypt, what would you say would be the first incentive to jump into or to promote an encouraging scheme for rooftop solar developers, from houses to hospitals to touristic facilities, to start boosting this wave of rooftop solar development potential?
That's a very nice question. So,
because in Dubai we've seen DEWA the driver, but in Egypt, is it players like yourselves, like Enara Capital and others, or?
I would say I would focus on main three things. The one thing which will take time, we all don't have control on it, which is the increase of the prices of the conventional energy. This is taking place, it's on the go, but as soon as we come closer to the cost of renewables, then things will change. That's number one. Number two, what we can do right now, and I think what we really need in Egypt is specific financial schemes for such projects. With the announcement of the tariff, there was a scheme that was supposed to be taking place in Egypt financing smaller size projects. It's not yet operational, and I think when it's operational or similar schemes, things will take off. So this is the second dimension. And Personally, I believe the third dimension would come from a real emphasis on standards and quality, because then when you don't have any control on the standards and quality on such specific small projects, you would find anyone, everybody supplying systems. And maybe it's not very good for the country and the general impression about solar energy, because then people would say, so it doesn't work, it's expensive or it's cheap or whatever. So putting the proper standards, putting financing, and coming closer to the real cost with respect to the energy, I think that's something will push the industry forward.
Before we move to Kurt about standards and quality, can I ask the audience a show of hands, how many of you knew that the very first solar and full-scale solar energy plant was developed? The first one around the world was established in Egypt in the 1920s?
Yes.
How many knew that? In 1918.
Was a solar thermal plant.
Oh, I see only the Egyptians knew that. It was established by a pioneering American in Maadi, an area which I really love to take long walks at. And actually, it's interesting. An American set it up there, and there's a popular American diner as well there. So moving to our American colleague, Kurt, when it comes to managing the demand side and the load in Egypt, and now that we're celebrating a 1 year, mashallah, of no power cuts, what would you say from your immense consulting background on the subject?
Well, thank you, Hadi. I guess your very interesting comment about the old solar plant is actually a very interesting point that I wanted to make, and that is that Egypt has been around for a very long time. It's a very capable nation. It's shown many times in the past a real ability to develop technologies, to implement schemes, to improve and meet its own needs. And what's happened since Sharm el-Sheikh is really a strong indication that that can still continue to happen. To see the development, the very large-scale development of simple cycle plants, gas-fired plants, which are now going to be converted to much more efficient combined cycle, but to meet the needs and the demands quickly, to at the same time institute programs and for coal-fired plants, which my company is involved with, and also for these renewable things, all at the same time. To see it all work at the same time is really quite amazing. So I think it's a great example for the rest of the world to look at, especially developing parts of the world. Now, our discussion today is about demand-side management, which has a very broad set of definitions. It can be used as a term to cover an awful lot of things, but in the one case here, we were first looking at demand-side management or just demand management from the point of view of meeting the demand period, but we're past that in Egypt now. So now we probably start looking at industrial demand. Your lowest hanging fruit generally is very large-scale industrial demand. It's moving that demand to different parts of the day, different time frames, so that peak demands can be shaved. And that additional generation capacity isn't needed so quickly because you're shifting the demand around. So I think that's clearly one of the first steps and probably the lowest hanging fruit that Egypt could look at. Another aspect then is instituting self-generation and energy efficiency, again, within the industrial environment, to go to homes, to go to small commercial establishments and expect much of a gain from efficiency improvements is sometimes a little bit longer road to go down. So to go to your industrial clients and customers and seek that. And one thing that I was making a point to you before is that a lot of times, in our experience, what we've seen is that industries who take that initiative and own that project to either improve their efficiency or to become a self-generator, and they really own that business case, they own the model, they own the benefits of it themselves, then they can incorporate it into their operations and make it much more successful. We're seeing that here in Abu Dhabi and Dubai through Emirates Global Aluminum, obviously a very large user of electricity, a large self-generator of electricity, but they don't just stop with what they have. They continually want to make it more efficient and to improve the cost aspects of it.
You've mirrored a lot of points that reflect the growing industrial potential in what you just said, Kurt. I've noticed over the course of the last year and through various conferences, various industrial organizations that operate between the GCC, Jordan, and Egypt. Let us say, for example, a major industrial group that operates warehouses and facilities. If they adopted, say, rooftop solar in their Jebel Ali facilities, they're duplicating it in Jordan and duplicating it in their Egyptian facilities. And we are witnessing here an awakening giant, a new economy of renewable energy where there are no borders. I mean, Sharif, yourself, you're based in Egypt, and now you're keeping your radar switched on for opportunities in the UAE. And clearly, at the end of the day, it's the same technology, the world's most simple form of generating power. I think that the next big thing is going to be industrial demands. That's going to be a major factor for large-scale rooftop solar projects. Looks like this iPad facility is going to be quite a nuisance. I'm getting a lot of questions. To Faisal, from the audience, what is the size of the rooftop solar market in Egypt? And where is the market forecasted to be in the next few years?
Okay, so the tariff actually structure that we have today in Egypt makes two kind of markets. We have the less than 500 kilowatt market, sort of, and then the big utility scale projects. So the rooftop projects are more or less limited to that capacity till now. What we see sometimes, and I think this is something we are also discussing with Neria and with Egyptera to see how we can expand a little bit, because in some industrial applications it's not only a half a mega, it usually goes up to 1 or 2 megas. So we want to see how we can put a proper structure also for the feed-in tariff for this one. However, at this stage, what we could see, answering the second part of the question, the growth is definitely coming on the industrial sector. And thank you very much for tapping on this demand side management. You have a lot of things to do. You could use smart meters. You could use time of use tariffs, which I think also Egypt is studying at this moment. I'm not sure whether it's going to be applied soon or not. But typically, the growth is in the industrial side, and specifically with the plans that the country have for the next years for development.
This is a question that the audience mentioned, a simple question. What are the solar energy targets? I know renewable energy target is 20% of total production by 2020. Gentlemen, do you have an indication on what are the specifically solar energy target from the
I believe we have Dr. Subki here. Yeah, no, he can. Yeah.
40% out of the 20%, and that's very achievable for a country that enjoys good sunshine and very good solar irradiance. Are there any deals, this is another question from the audience, are there any deals being announced recently on renewables? And this is also a footnote from another member of the audience. What's the next solid, tangible step we are expecting in Egypt? Again, we heard about a lot of bilateral deals being put in place, the feed-in tariff program, which includes a number of schemes, and we've got the recently announced tenders in Egypt. But where do we go from there? What is the solid, tangible platform that we're going to find Egypt steering towards? Sharif?
Well, it's going to be supply-demand again. We're a market economy. So what's being structured as we speak today is mostly we were under a firefighting mode for the last 2 years. We had to meet a main necessity of generation. As far as I know, and as far as I understand, as I see as well, is that the fundamentals are there. We have a very strong industrial base. We have a very strong residential as well in terms of markets. Specifically on the industrial, we do have diversified industries from high intensive energy consumption industries, steel, cements, petrochemicals, etc., which represent a very lucrative market to tap in. You have big residential developments, and most and foremost is that we are projected to grow. So with this growth, so definitely there shall be demand. Thing is that we need legislative frameworks, we need structures to work according. So I believe the essence of a unified electricity law and in parallel removing subsidies, these are two pillars you can build on a market. So no subsidies, a unified electricity law where you can sell and buy, a liberal market, then definitely this means that there is a market coming up.
A unified
Electricity
law and removal of subsidies, which takes me to the next question from the audience. With that in mind, are there any main geographical areas in Dunya, in Egypt, where we could expect a blooming of solar energy projects or renewable energy installations? I would assume it's those master developments that we keep seeing a lot that are catering to incoming Egyptians from the diaspora, or perhaps the touristic areas. Sharif, and then I'd like Faisal to comment on that.
Okay, so according to the government schemes we see today, West Delta Minya would be the biggest producer of renewable energy. We're looking at an 8 gigawatt land plants. And yes, definitely tourism areas are usually in sunny areas, are usually in places where it's easier to install solar. And there has been some schemes, I believe, with the Ministry of Tourism and NERIA being designed to give incentives for hotels and so they can have some renewable projects in place. But specifically, it's going to follow development. I mean, it's going to follow the usual economic development, you know. So in south of Egypt, there are many industries, industrial zones designed. You have the new economic zone, Suez Canal Zone, for instance. So it would follow developments usually. Yeah.
Faisal, do you think with that as well in mind, would we see a blooming of also the wind energy in parallel?
Yes, I was just going to comment on this. Thank you for mentioning it. I think everybody is looking, the whole world, including ourselves, are looking forward for two things. Aswan, Benban, with the 2,000 megawatt expectations. Of course, the biggest part of it is in Benban. There is another part of Zafarana, and in the future also in the West and East Nile. And the second part with regards to the wind is in the Gulf of Suez area and Gabal Zayt. So this is the main two programs we have now. That's the utility scale projects, which is directly in cooperation with the government. And my own expectation, as Sharif said as well, when it comes to tourism, we have a specific program that is trying to take off specific areas which is not on the grid. Places like Marsa Alam, like Al Wahat, those are off-grid areas where hybrid solutions could work perfectly together. So this is the main focus. In addition to the industrial facilities, wherever it is, I think this is where the main focus is now.
We're approaching our time deadline, but I've got two questions from the audience. One of them made me giggle, to be honest, and maybe Kurt, you could answer that.
You give me the funny
and I'd like to meet the guy who sent this question because we all talk about when are we going to sign deals? When are the Egyptians going to do this? When is DEWA going to announce that? But a member of the audience, bless him, mentioned, when will PV costs stop going down? It seems like the more we wait, the better deals we get.
It's a good buyer's position to be in, I guess. But I think you have to be careful as an industry like this matures, and it involves not a new technology, but a technology that's changing rather dramatically and allowing for costs to drop. You have to be very careful to watch for what is really truly a drop in cost and what is actually a drop in quality or in capability of the equipment you're buying. PV plants are essentially nothing but equipment, and I can say that from my point of view because we're a power plant design organization. There's very little for us to design in a PV plant. It's all in the equipment And if you go to that equipment manufacturer and you say, I want lower prices, I want lower prices, I want lower prices, well, guess what? They'll find a way to lower the prices, but they're not going to lose money. So we have to be careful as the industry moves forward not to expect a continuing fast drop in these prices without being very careful about the standards. We talked about standards, quality standards, the ability of the equipment to last for the utility grade time periods of 20 and 30 years, okay? So they'll keep going down as long as the pressure's there, but there's a consummate cost to pay.
And one last question from the audience. We have a new project for major power generation. I mean, the Egyptian scene has different geographical settings, from water reservoirs, dams, canals, the Nile Valley, etc. Could we perceive or envisage upcoming novel technologies where we could connect water bodies or connect air currents through valleys to tap into the invention of new energy generation schemes? There's a lot of wind energy inventions, and it's like a Pandora's box. Faisal, do you think, from someone who's developing multimodal renewable energy schemes, you see a growing potential for new ideas in capturing renewable energy in Egypt?
Yes, I think there is one untapped part that we did not maybe talk about is bio. And as far as I understand, Dr. Sobki could also confirm there is something should be coming soon in Egypt. There is one more project or focus for the previous question that maybe I did not comment on. There is a project in Jabal Ata'a now with this hydro storage. So this is something that combines a new technology of using hydro in a different way. So it's used to pump water up a very high hill in Jabal Ata'a near Ain Sokhna, and then in peak demand, then you use the water to operate hydro turbines. So this is a new way of utilizing hydro potential in Egypt as well. I personally don't think that we're going to build another high dam. There is no potential for that, but there is surely potential for such new ideas and new inventions. We've also looked at small hydro generation, specifically in the Nile, but I'm not sure if this is the correct time for it now. It's for sure a potential, and I think the whole world is also tapping on this opportunity everywhere.
And with that, I thank the distinguished panelists for your interesting discussion, and thank you for the audience for participating. And with that note, I'd like to say onwards with Egypt, wa amar ya Masr, and thank you very much.